Have you ever wondered if there was a single constitution for the entire galaxy? You know, a universal law that covers everything from your personal rights to how interstellar wars are handled? Well, today we are diving into a document that claims to be exactly that, the Codex Galactic. So, let's get into it.
I mean, it's a massive question, right? Would a code like that focus more on individual freedom, or would it be all about the collective good? How would you even begin to define justice on a cosmic scale? Well, according to the source material we're looking at today, a document called the Codex Galactic claims to have it all figured out. So, what exactly is this Galactic Codex? The source material describes it as something way more than just a dry legal document. It's meant to be a foundational code of ethics, kind of like a moral compass that's supposedly followed by the most advanced and benevolent civilizations out there in our galaxy. Let's see what that actually looks like. Okay, so here is the first really key idea you have to grasp. This is not a set of laws forced on people by some galactic government. The source makes a huge point that the Codex is an internal code. It's something that these enlightened beings are said to adopt willingly, just because it perfectly mirrors their own inner truth about what's right and wrong.
And apparently this code has a pretty epic history. The source claims it was discovered millions of years ago by something called the Central Race, right as they were reaching spiritual maturity. So it wasn't just invented, it was forged in the fires of these ancient galactic wars, and it eventually became the #1 guiding principle for a group known as the Galactic Confederation.
And this is where the entire story pivots and points directly at us. According to this text, Earth has a really unique place in the cosmos, and, well, it's not a good one. It's described as the very last planet that is still occupied by dark forces. We're apparently the final lingering battleground of a huge war that the rest of the galaxy won a long, long time ago. And you really have to understand this point to get the rest of the Codex. All right, so if the galaxy is supposed to be this harmonious place, what does that actually mean for an individual being? Well, Section 1 of the Codex, which is called the Law of Divine Grace, lays it all out. Honestly, you can think of it as a kind of cosmic Bill of Rights. It defines the promises made to every single being in a liberated universe.
Now this, right here, is a totally radical idea. The Codex basically argues that suffering is not some noble tool for growth. No. Instead, it's described as a form of programming, almost like a mental virus that's used by negative forces to keep people down. In a truly free society, a positive life isn't something you have to earn. It's a guaranteed, inalienable right, period.
So how is that positive experience guaranteed? Well, the Codex breaks it down into 5 fundamental rights. You've got the right to both physical and spiritual abundance, the right to evolve, which they call ascension, the right to connect with your soul family, the right to all information you need, and finally, the absolute right to freedom.
But, rights are only really meaningful if you have a way to defend them. So what happens when some being or some group violates the Codex? The next couple sections lay out what you might call the cosmic rules of engagement.
The Codex seems to have a two-pronged approach to justice. First, for your standard conflicts, Section 2 is all about mediation. The light forces step in, they separate the two sides, and they help negotiate a peaceful solution. But for those who fundamentally reject the very principles of the Codex, the so-called dark forces, Section 3 outlines a much, much more severe path.
And the path it lays out is pretty stark. When members of the dark forces are defeated, they're given one last choice: accept the Codex, fix your past mistakes, and you'll be forgiven. Simple as that. But if they refuse that offer, the document says they are taken to the central sun, and there, their consciousness is literally broken down, restructured into its most basic essence, forcing them to start their entire evolutionary journey all over again, from scratch.
Okay, so all of this brings us to what is probably the most relevant part of this whole document for us, the law of intervention. I mean, if Earth is described as an occupied planet, what does the Codex have to say about taking action?
And the statement in Section 4 is incredibly powerful. It gives the Galactic Confederation the absolute unconditional right to intervene anywhere the Codex is being violated. And here's the kicker. It says this right trumps any local laws or customs. I mean, that's the ultimate legal justification for action right there.
So of course, this leads to the big question, doesn't it? If these benevolent forces have the right to step in, and Earth is supposedly suffering so much, what's the holdup? Well, the document actually addresses this head-on, and the answer it gives is probably not what you'd expect.
So get this. The delay isn't about respecting humanity's free will to suffer, like you might assume.
According to this source, it's a hostage situation, plain and simple. The occupying forces are threatening to set off a nuclear apocalypse if the Confederation tries to intervene directly. And that just reframes the entire problem, doesn't it? It's not some philosophical debate. It's a delicate, tactical standoff.
Okay, so if a direct military intervention is off the table, what's the end game? What does the future look like? Let's take a look at the vision the source material has for Earth once this cosmic standoff is finally over.
Now, the document makes a very bold and, let's be honest, probably controversial claim. It argues directly against the idea that humanity should just be left alone to sort out its own messes. It points to our history of endless wars and suffering, and basically concludes that we've proven we're incapable of governing ourselves, and that we need a period of guidance under wise guardians.
But the whole text ends on this note of absolute certainty. It claims that this whole cosmic standoff is already being resolved, and that Earth's liberation is imminent. And when that finally happens, the Galactic Codex is expected to become the new universal code of ethics for our planet, bringing what it calls the long era of darkness to a final close.
And that brings our whole explainer to a close. It's a huge, sweeping, cosmic story for sure, but it leaves us with a really personal question to think about. Looking at that list of rights, abundance, ascension, merging with your soul family, information, and freedom. If you could invoke just one of those for yourself and for the whole world right now, which one would you choose?